Thomas Frank Carr here with Nate Bauer reacting to the news that we received shortly before it aired. James Franklin fired as the head football coach for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Nate, just want to get your initial reactions to what happened over the last month of the season and the ultimate conclusion, what happened here with James Franklin being let go after what was an ugly scene post-game, again, at a home game where James Franklin failed to deliver a win that his fan base wanted.
Yeah, I think on the trajectory of or on the scale of stunning turns of events, right? This has to be right up there. It was not that long ago that Penn State was the number 2 ranked team in the country and hosting Oregon for a whiteout game that, like the 3 non-conference games before it, did not look great for most of the game, but also included a fourth quarter comeback, right? And even a lead for Penn State in overtime. But it was not to be that night. And then, I'm just not sure which cliche you want to use, but the wheels coming off certainly is what exactly has transpired in the time since. So, for Penn State to be on this trajectory, to have such high aspirations for this season, for those to obviously be unmet, but also not just unmet, but failed spectacularly.
Yeah.
It was really what I said last night, right? It was no longer about what is the outcome of this. It's just decisions and the timing of those decisions, which obviously they made. Pat Kraft and his staff, his circle there, was able to come to that conclusion and has announced it now this afternoon.
Yeah. Pat Kraft, not necessarily a wait and see kind of guy, the way we've seen him operate over the last couple of years. What we know as of right now, Terry Smith will be the interim acting head coach. Not a surprise, as he is the assistant head coach for the team, one of the longest tenured members of the staff, and a guy that has been around Penn State football for quite a long time. The decision, as far as we understand, was made last night, and so it was more about putting things in motion today as far as getting, the ducks in an order and all of those things. I guess we have been talking about the opportunity, the possibility, the reality of James Franklin being let go at some point in the near future, given as this has played out, the conversation started happening that, in more than one section of the Penn State fan base, not just upset fans that don't necessarily enjoy James Franklin's style of coaching, but just generally that it felt like there was, for the first time, smoke to that conversation a few weeks ago, and now here we are. So I guess, what do you make of the timeline and really the moment now, given all the things we talked about of the difficulty of this decision for Penn State from a financial standpoint to make all this happen?
Yeah, it's just there is a 12-year history, 11-year history of James Franklin and what he's done with this program, right? That just, I don't think can be overlooked, right? It can't be glossed over. Certainly the program that he inherited and some of the struggles that it had when he took the job, being able to kind of weather the storm of the NCAA sanctions, obviously the success that they had with the Rose Bowl season in 2016, right? Kind of Saquon Barkley and how that went. But then after that, just this steady drumbeat of a team and a program that was both ends of the spectrum exemplified, right? On the one end of the spectrum, as consistent, really in so many ways as anybody in college football over those years of beating teams that they were supposed to beat. And on the other hand, unlike anybody in college football, never beating the teams that they weren't supposed to beat. And
right.
It was uncanny. There just wasn't really anything like it in terms of that consistency. And that was really the story. Was Penn State was among the few programs in college football that was very rarely an underdog. There's just not a lot of programs that were that consistent in being top 5, top 10, right, in this position where they're expected to compete in those games. So that's a hallmark.
Yeah.
But on the backside of that hallmark is this inability to get over that hump. And so when Oregon happened, yeah, there was a sense of shock, right? Or disappointment, certainly internally at Penn State.
As we laid it out, their best opportunity to get one of these wins with a senior quarterback, a senior-laden team on offense, transfers that were infused into the program, and a home game, a whiteout, your best opportunity from an advantage standpoint to get that signature win at home and then to have the offensive performance you had. 3 points and 109 yards through 3 quarters. Coming alive at the end or not, the optics of it from the beginning of the season with the struggle in the non-conference through that game were, I think, a point in the direction of things were I don't want to say things were untenable at that point, because if they don't lose those 2 next games that we are sitting here in this reality of, then you've got 1 loss to a top team in the country, and it's kind of, the same old story. It's the same exact story, but here we are in the new timeline, in the new reality of James Franklin, and really the bottom falling out for this team. What do you attribute that to? I guess that's to me, the question here is not necessarily the decision after these last 3 games, but I'm still from the film perspective of, like, these are the answers that are on the field. And if I may just, kind of provide my point of view. The decision-making that leads to what happens on the field is the context for all the decisions that happen in the program. It is the summation of all of your efforts. And what we have seen over the last 6 games here from the Nittany Lions in the non-conference season on offense, as it turned out to be, they weren't just working on stuff because they wanted to sharpen it up. They were working on stuff on offense because it wasn't working. Then you go through these last 3 games, and the last 3 games are uncharacteristic of the program's effort and ability to bounce back and play through adversity and beat the teams, as you laid out there in the history of James Franklin, for them to beat. And the evidence on the field, especially in this last game, is that things were slipping. Bad decision-making from players, lack of focus, penalties, uncharacteristic play. And so I guess, I'm still piecing this together, and I'm wondering, do you have a perspective on what led to really the backstop of what they've been for so long that you pointed out, just disappearing and leading to where we are now?
It sounds simplistic, but getting broken, right? Just being broken by the Oregon loss for sure. I was going to say something to the effect of, it was like things weren't as they seemed, but it's actually the opposite concept of that, right? It's things were exactly as they seemed, whether it was being recognized or not. And there was all this evidence on the field of, hey, look, I said it and I'll own it and I'll commit to it. They did want to work on things, right? They did want to work on downfield passing. They attempted things in those first 3 games that they have not done since, because they very clearly exhibited to themselves that they weren't good at it and they weren't getting better at it, right? And so this idea of that was happening publicly, that James Franklin was talking about, that his staff was talking about, that the players were talking about, of finding continual growth because they were not the team that they needed to become to win a national championship, to get to the playoff, whatever. That continual growth needed to happen as they were winning games anyway. They were never a team in the 4th week of the season that was prepared to beat Oregon, who was prepared to be that team. But at the same time, by the time that you got to UCLA and by the time that you play Northwestern, you still have to be making that progress, and that progress never came. There has been
regression. I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't gotten to the defensive side of the film to really have the full context of what's going on over there from a play-to-play perspective, but it was very clear what was happening last night of players weren't getting off blocks. And I said offhandedly in the post-game show, maybe they have been changing things up, and now there is a confusion or a hesitancy to the defense because now you're pivoting. Like now you're making these changes, and Penn State fans were screaming for changes, for adjustments, and sometimes the adjustment is worse than the original game plan, but I haven't really been able to see like what was the change that led to this kind of rock bottom place for Penn State football where, I mean, Nate, one of the reasons where, just inside baseball, I'm trying to get the post-game show ready, and normally I have a schedule of how these things work, and the fourth quarter was over because the Penn State defense allowed a drive that ended the game, where normally like the last 2 minutes take a while, right? And so all these things, it as you mentioned, like it wasn't a slow careening off a cliff. Like it was not a slow crash. It was careening off a cliff and a total system failure here at the end. Yep. And so I do want to go to the next phase of this. Because we're here to talk about this. We're not going to spend an hour-long show discussing it. We want to make sure this is a little more concise as Nate and I can be, which is
which is not possible.
Not possible, So like, buckle up. But what do you know the financial situation that you can share here? And what do you know at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com that you can share with people if they want to go check it out? Which, by the way, speaking of financial situations, it's not going to kill you if you want to join us because it's just $1 for a week, and you get access to The Athletic included for a year as well. Everyone knows with the promo deal, I just can't find my graphics. So what do you know of the situation on that side of things and how that can affect Penn State and the financials long term, given they have to overcome what seems like a large barrier here?
Yeah, I think the front-facing side of it is there are $50 million fully guaranteed to James Franklin based on being fired at 50-ish, right? You've got $48 million in terms of years, and then roughly $1.5 million, $2 million left on this year's contract for those 10 weeks. How does it play out? How will it be structured? What are the agreements? I do not know. I do not know right at the second. It is not right. There's a front-facing contract that's 2 pages, I think, that Penn State put out when the extension was done. It does not show if there's an offset clause, right? So that if James Franklin has another position in football coaching, TV, whatever, that Penn State is making up the balance of whatever he is making. It does not say anything about a percentage for a lump sum payment. That was something that you saw with Tom Allen. When Tom Allen was fired in Indiana, he accepted a lower overall payment as one lump sum, or I think it was in 2 installments for him of roughly $16 million. So for Franklin and for Penn State, look, like, are these things important? Absolutely. That's a heavy load, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think that you understand the constraints and really all sides of the argument that like Pat Kraft has to make decisions. That is what he is employed to do. And part of those decisions are a $700 million stadium project that's going up that has huge donor backing, that has huge implications for revenues at Penn State football in the future. That stadium has to sell out every single year, every single game. That is critical to the future, not just of Penn State football, of Penn State athletics.
The balance of $50 million versus what is the other side of that, which is the continuing attrition between what has become a bad marriage. I think there's no way of putting it other than the Penn State fan base and James Franklin were obviously at odds. It wasn't just a select few fans. It wasn't just a select few people. There was a growing groundswell that, especially after these 3 games, was gaining momentum. So, like, to kind of, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but like, it is very clear that what you're stating is $50 million in the long run if this continues to drain from Penn State's enthusiasm of people coming to the games, causes a larger net negative from the coffers. Is that fair?
Yeah, totally. And there's a second piece of it, which is, where does James Franklin go from here? Where does he look? And this is me just talking.
Yep.
He felt he was not owed, but worthy of a contract extension and renegotiation this summer. That was a thing that Penn State had to deal with, understanding that there were multiple years left, obviously 6 years left on that extension from 2022. He had fallen out. There was just this past week USA Today put out a list of coaching compensation. I think he came in at 17th, maybe 18th on that list. And this is for a head coach who had just taken the program to a college football semifinal the year prior and had, they finished 7, 13, and 5 in the past 3 years. It literally the 3 years of the contract extension that he signed, that is the finish. So yeah, even if you want to average them out to 8th, right? There's a disparity there between 8th and 16th, 17th, 18th in coaching compensation. Penn State did not do, obviously, that extension. But point being, what I'm getting at is to go from that 6 months ago, hey, a contract extension is probably deserved, to fired. Does he want to do that? Like, does he want to coach? Does he owe Penn State anything in that arrangement? Because there is absolutely, if you want to talk about toxic and how the relationship transformed between himself and Penn State, I think very clearly there's evidence of that in being the act of being fired, but also certainly how the fan base responded to him, all of those things. And so it gets very interesting from my perspective as to whether or not he wants to live in Florida and collect $8 million annually. It doesn't have to be a lump sum. He could absolutely force the issue with Penn State and say, I am owed every penny of this. I am not going to work another day in my life. What is left for him to accomplish and trust me, he could fix his top 25 record. It would take 21 wins for him to get to 500, right? Where is he going to go? Is he going to go to Florida State? Is he going to go to Arkansas? Is he going to go to Kentucky? Is there a landing spot for
all
him?
All the times we've talked about James Franklin and going to a different program, and maybe that was leveraging to get better deals out of Penn State, and maybe it was him genuinely wanting to go somewhere else. It was an opportunity that was on the positive side of springboarding off success. You don't find a positive springboard off of success from a 3-3 loss to Northwestern, UCLA, and being summarily discharged in week 7 of the college football season.
There are lots. I know nobody's going to believe this right now. There are lots of college football programs that would happily take James Franklin to rebuild their program. Programs that are lost in the mire of 6-6 and 7-5 and 8-4, right? That they would be overjoyed to have James Franklin services and would probably compensate him very, very well for it. But if that happens and the offset clause is impacted and Penn State doesn't owe him any money, that's fine. Does he get the satisfaction of rebuilding another program and still being up against it in terms of his ability to win if the whole point of all of this is to win a national championship, is there a program he can go to that can win a national championship that will have him? I don't think so. Not right now.
No,
and
not with the perception
after a year.
No.
Right?
So that puts Penn State in a really interesting position, as you just pointed out, of they're going to be paying the coach to go away. It feels like as of right now, the actual reality of the situation. There's no college football commissioner position, which I think we've had this conversation before. James Franklin has been lobbying for one. That would be a very interesting thing. There is something else that I want to talk to you about, because this is, and for people that don't want to care about this, I don't care. It is part of the story. And you mentioned James Franklin and the history of him being here at Penn State and what he was able to do from the beginning to the end. I said this the other day. I'm going to reiterate it now that we're here in the moment. And this is coming from, I'm just saying your words back to you, Nate. There were not the expectations internally for Penn State to be a national championship contender through maybe, the first 7 years that he was here? 6? I don't know what it would be. Then James Franklin, through the attrition of grinding through the bureaucracy, wins a lot of those battles to get his alignment. The alignment results in expectations that then get him fired.
Yep.
I don't know the definition of irony, but that feels ironic.
I don't think he would have had it any other way, to be honest with you. I like the whole point of this, especially for him and what he wanted for the program, what was to compete for national championships and to do it every single year, to compete for Big Ten championships, to do all of those things at the highest level. And so all of that maneuvering behind the scenes and all of the dominoes that had to fall to get Neely Bendapudi into her seat, to get Pat Kraft into his seat, to have people that wanted the same things and were willing to be supportive partners in that endeavor. I don't think, and obviously I can't speak for him, but I don't think he would change that. I don't think he would change those raised expectations. The thing that I think, is again, like kind of darkly ironic is it's not those expectations that ended up getting him fired. It is the expectations of this year specifically. It is the expectations of, you came off of what happened last year and said to everyone, this is the path. This is how we get over the hump that we couldn't get over last year, is that all of those players who had those experiences last year would be the foundation of the new team, this year's team, that could get it done, right? You had all these coaching staff. You had Jim Knowles coming in, who had just won a national championship. All of it was about winning a national championship. And when that doesn't pan out, look, is he getting fired if they make the college football playoff as a 10 seed and lose in the first round? No. Nope. He's not. And certainly not in season, obviously, right? Like even at 3-2, you saw that. But the way that college football playoff is out for this year, 100%. This team hasn't won a Big Ten game. They've played 3 Big Ten games.
That's shocking.
They have not won one.
Every time I write that, I'm shocked to think about it. Like, their last win was Villanova, and again, didn't look all that convincing considering the final score. This is a great transition point to, I think, what we were both trying to summarize yesterday. And I actually texted you. We were texting about this last night. I don't know that either of us did a very good job of putting our arms around the conversation about Drew Aller, the end of his career at Penn State with that injury, and really the class of 2022 in general, because that is the genesis of this conversation. If you go back and look at Penn State's recruiting, their top 5 classes, building towards a national championship, 2020, because of the 2018 class. COVID, disrupted that opportunity. Micah Parsons goes to the NFL. That falls through. So then there's a reset, a hard reset, 2021, 2022. And finally, you get that class of 2022. You have multiple 5 stars, according to both industry and individual rankings. And if you look at the trajectory of those players, 3 of them came back. None of them are first-round draft picks this year. Not only did they come back for a chance to go to the national championship and everything you just laid out of the expectations before the season, but in this season, the most pivotal return instead of go to college and build a national champion, convincing those players to either come back and forego a mid-round or a decent draft grade to try and make it better. It all cratered. Again, that is the word here. It cratered. Is that, how do you fold that into the conversation here about legacy and narrative and having your first 5-star quarterback go out the way he did?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, certainly, look, there is the human element of empathy at minimum for James Franklin.
Sure.
Certainly, I don't understand any Penn State fan, and I'm not suggesting that this isn't how Penn State fans feel. I think they do feel this way, of just overwhelming compassion for Drew Aller and his family, just for this to happen. Like, this is it's just, it goes beyond sports, really, right? This is his life, and this is his trajectory as a professional. So that is just terrible news, how that has played out.
Yeah.
Look, this is where things get super interesting, because it's not just about this year, and it's not just about what's happened in the last 2 years. What is the main characteristic of Ohio State's success, Oregon's success, Alabama's success, Georgia's success, right? What is it? It's consistency with top 5 recruiting classes.
I thought you were going to say money.
Oh, well.
I mean, I feel like those two things are kind of the same thing. Sorry, Nick Saban. I know you're going to get mad about that, but I feel like money was a part of all of that.
Money is a part of those top 5 recruiting classes. But the point is, and this is something that I think we have touched on to a certain extent before, all of this at Penn State was an upward trajectory toward this year, where that number 5 ranked class, surrounded on either side by 13th ranked class and 15th ranked class. And
I think 2023 was an underrated class, but underrated does not mean that there was they were brimming with talent. And you look at some of those guys that I think had the most potential of Tony Rojas not playing, Anthony Donko in and out of the lineup, Cooper Cousins in the class of 2024. A lot of these things had not been backfilled the way that you were just describing. And I apologize to cut you off, but I got excited.
But there was so much hope from Penn State that this would be the payoff, when I think in a lot of ways the payoff already happened.
It was last year.
The semifinal was the payoff, right?
Yeah.
If you can get back to that, great. But the whole point of consistency and sustained success is you've got to come to the table sitting down with a bunch of chips, and you just keep going. You just keep going. Every hand, every season is a new opportunity to put yourself back in that conversation. And 1 year, it all aligns and it clicks and you're good. But you cannot be in that position. You cannot expect those results based around, bluntly, 15th ranked recruiting classes every single season. Minimal, I don't even know the rankings, but I can't imagine that Penn State has finished in the top 30 of national transfer portal ranking hauls over the last 3 or 4 years. They're just not. They're not relevant in that conversation. And so it is absolutely this year on James Franklin, bar none. The buck stops with him. Did not get it done. Crash out, spectacular crash and burn. All that responsibility is on him. But Penn State has it in its mind that it will be a competitor with a seat at the table moving forward. It is going to need all of the things that James Franklin needed and wanted and more.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it doesn't change with the name at the top of the roster. The institutional conversations that we had with James Franklin are all going to be the same. And I guess this is the last thing, and neither of us are going to be a part of this. And again, this is why we cover this at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com from every single angle. We're giving you the big picture here on our live show discussing Penn State head coach James Franklin being relieved of his duties after an 0-3 start in Big Ten play. But of course, then there is the Steve Baker talking about here, kids are going to flood to the portal. How do you stop the bleeding here? I guess that's an open question, Nate. I don't know. I don't know how you have the answer here. But again, money is a big part of this. Yep. And if we just discussed that maybe James Franklin is going to sit on his hands for $8 million a year, and that's that, this is not an infinite source. Money is not infinite, and it is not infinite in the moment where you can just then draw up a bunch of it out of nowhere. So to be competitive, as you mentioned, with the NIL portal and all those things, we've talked about Penn State's overall plan in a bunch of different places in terms of retaining your own roster, right? Paying for the players that you've already recruited, and trying to be aggressive in places for certain players. It is fair to say that, did Penn State missed the opportunity to drop a bag for a wide receiver in the portal, maybe a defensive tackle that could fit in this scheme? Was the plan? These are the decisions going back through time that we've talked about, we've outlined here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel on our BWI live show. If you're watching here, subscribe, because we've been doing this since the beginning of time, and we'll be doing it long after. Those are the conversations we're going to be having over the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. And of course, when there's a new staff in place, we will be covering that as well. So we got just a couple more seconds. Is there anything we missed? Anything big that we missed in the conversation that we should decide? Because of course, everyone wants to know, who the next coach is going to be. There's 1,000 names. Some of them are good. Some of them are terrible in the chat from people that have discussed what they think should happen as far as Penn State's next head coach. Sean Fitz right now is writing a hot board of potential candidates over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can check that out. But Nate, what are you thinking about as we get to the end of this conversation about everything in totality over the last 12 years? Sum it up for us here as we get out of here, or what you think about going forward with the program.
Yeah, I think it would be an injustice to not acknowledge and recognize what James Franklin did and the effort that he made with his right. It's always one person. It's not James Franklin's insatiable, driven, right? He's just a super motivated guy. That helped propel this program and the people around it to want the same things and what it takes, understanding what it takes, not just at Penn State, because to me, that's the biggest learning lesson that happened during his tenure was an exposure to what everybody else is doing in college football. Because I do think to a large extent, Penn State has an insular view of itself. That these are the things that Penn State football is built on. And by doing those things and leaning into it, it will establish and have the same success regardless of what's happening in the climate around it. I think that very clearly over the last 12 years, his influence was changing what those conditions were for Penn State to be more competitive, lean into the things that Penn State's good at. Absolutely. Lean into that identity, but also get a better understanding of what it takes outside of that bubble and then do those things. Penn State has done those things, over the last 2 years.
Yep.
It will need to continue to do those things, to have that type of aggressiveness, to have buy-in. Maybe there is and man, we have all the time in the world in the future to talk about this, but if I had a first postmortem of his legacy, it is absolutely internally managing to collect people and get them to share in a vision and go with it. And concurrently a failure to get everybody else to understand and do the same things. Donors, the community surrounding the all of those things. It was never a shared vision. And that's his job. His job is to be, in a lot of ways, convincing, to get people on board, to get people to buy into this is the way it's done. People didn't buy it. They never fully came on board because the results didn't reflect it. They didn't have the success on the backside of the investment progress that was made. And so it's super interesting. Pat Kraft and his staff have their work cut out for them to get somebody else that matches the Penn State identity. That nobody's going to be there's never going to be a consensus, right? Whether it's Matt Rule, whether it's Urban Meyer, it does not matter what the name is. Whoever sits in that chair, it's not going to be complete sunshine and rainbows, and it doesn't have to be, but it certainly has to be more of a communal effort to get the program where everybody wants it to be. And I do think that there is more of an opportunity there than is being one that existed with James Franklin. And two, that is being acknowledged. I do think that there is a window there to tap into something that hasn't really happened, over the last few years.
I think you've done a masterful job of outlining those things and giving clarity to all that stuff over the years, putting a point on it here at the beginning of the next chapter and the end of this one with James Franklin. I think you nailed it. I guess the last thing I want to add here is there is an interesting aspect of this to me that a certain part of the fan base did not buy into James Franklin because he was not Joe Paterno. And yet the way he conducted himself in terms of caring about players. And I think that having been around the program, having seen him interact, some of the things that you've seen recently, I don't think that you can question he cared about the players, the development of the people off the field and on the field. And I think to a certain degree, and this is going to come as a very literal translation between the two, a conservatism in his approach to the game of football. There were decisions made. There were in-game decisions made that, as I observed the end of the Joe Paterno era as a student and as early as a broadcast journalist, there was a certain theme that rang over. Again, the final product on the field tells me a lot about what the situation was. James Franklin was much closer in his heart to an old school coach like Joe Paterno than I think fans thought of him early or late. And those decisions to be conservative in certain situations, and I'll go back again to retention and players over acquisitions in the portal, being loyal to players, all those things that I think are good qualities in a person. Maybe we can say in retrospect, not being more aggressive in those moments when there was an opportunity to push the chips in might have been another one of those that changed the fortune for him on the field, which then at the end of the day changes the fortunes for him everywhere else, because no one will argue if you win. And ultimately, that's where we are here. I wanted to give you the last word, but then you just set me up perfectly for that. So I appreciate that. We're going to have a lot more to say. I don't know if we're going to be coming back on Monday with a video after this one, but we will be back on the BWI Live show on Tuesday. We will stand by. The Monday press conference, I imagine, is going to be at the same time. It'll be Terry Smith instead of James Franklin. His process, we don't know what Terry's process is going to be like, but I do know that you are absolutely going to want to watch that video here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. The press conference is typically at noon. And we will have that for you shortly after its conclusion. And of course, if there are other news conferences, if Pat Kraft has availability, we'll bring all of that to you. And then more importantly, the context after it is what we're going to get you over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, the meaning of all of this stuff. So everyone, thank you for being here. We'll have more from Penn State football as this unfolds. I'm Thomas Frank Carr for Nate Bauer, Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder, Greg Pickle, and all of their excellent work. We'll be back next time, as always, when news breaks from Penn State football.